Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have Chris Liddle on, and it's been since 2021, I think, since we've actually done a podcast together. We've had, I think, two or three with Mark Zarate, and all the podcasts that I've done with Chris have been very grounding because he comes at it with this approach that blends in. Yes, we can be someone that wants to achieve our goals, but that isn't different and it isn't separate from actually being kind to yourself, from having some compassion in the process, because you can still have goals at the same time as having some compassion with yourself. But I think in the mix of all of this, we kind of think that that means we're getting lazy, that we're letting ourselves go, and that being proud of ourselves isn't something that we should do, because what if, what if, what if? So with that, I'm going to let Chris introduce himself and where you come at all of this with the whole groundedness, because I know that you're chasing the common ground is something that is what your podcast is called as well. So
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Ruby. And it has been a while since we last connected and we were on Mark's show together. Quick intro about myself. I coach people in person, online. I produce several podcasts. I help with a few different fitness businesses, both on the back end work with like other coaches and with servicing clients who are located all over the US and Canada. But the biggest thing for me is helping people find purpose, find connection, and sustain a good quality of life. Like I would say that is what my biggest goal is. And as you alluded to, my podcast is called Chasing Common Ground. And I had kind of rebranded it from previously being called The Lifestyle Chase. And I liked talking about chasing common ground because I find there is so much divisiveness in the day-to-day world, where people have an opportunity to better themselves, or people have an opportunity to get to know themselves better through somebody else, and they leave that opportunity on the table because they are so fixed in their camps, in their belief systems, in their biases, and they're unwilling to see things from somebody else's perspective. And my whole mission with like having conversations on my podcast and on other people's podcasts is to connect and find ways to improve both people through a productive, respectful manner where like people can improve.
you said biases, but there's a huge trap there because we don't have biases. If that's the whole truth, that is the reality. That's what I believe to be true. So it is the truth. And I heard a quote. I would love to hear where you take this. We question everything except that which we believe to be fundamentally true, meaning we can believe something so wholeheartedly to be true. So we're not going to question it, but what makes it the truth? And just because when you did rebrand your podcast, it went from the lifestyle chase to the common ground, well, chasing common ground, it's still coming from this holistic perspective where there was a lifestyle chase. And that's what I loved about you, because what's the whole point of chasing goals if you're leaving your life behind in the process? And this is what I was speaking to you about before I hit record, because this is the fundamental aspect of everything. You're going to become this shell that is unfulfilled, chasing all of these things if you don't bring your life with you, if you don't bring joy with you. And the more that we do that, I feel like that is something that gets us caught in the trap of believing certain things to be so fundamentally true, because we lose that touch with ourselves, would you say? I'd love to know your take on that and how that all integrates together.
So I find that a lot of times people pursue things based on what they think somebody else thinks about them, or what somebody else has kind of outlined as being like the North Star, like the thing to work towards. For example, like a lot of people will chase a certain physique, or they'll chase a certain like milestone because someone in their life pursued that, and it kind of feels like the rite of passage. This could even be when a person's making career choices. Like I know when I was like, before I was in the fitness industry, I considered how like maybe I should follow a career path of somebody that I knew who had done something. Like maybe I should do something more traditional, like be a teacher, or maybe I should uh like, I would say teacher was probably the most prominent one, and the thing that was like my big goal, it was going to be working in film, doing video editing and stuff. Ironically, I ended up doing that in some aspect of my work. I used to set goals based on what other people were kind of setting as like their North Star. And then I learned that it was more sustainable, more meaningful, and easier to stay motivated if I set goals based on my own sense of purpose and sense of fulfillment. And as such, I've been able to transpose that same principle to a lot of the people that I work with online, where they will be focused maybe on like reducing their fat in the midsection, or trying to get rid of extra loose skin around their arms or something, and they forget to measure the milestones of their abilities, like the things that they're able to do with their life. Let's say, for example, they like to go bird watching, and they forgot that like a year ago, a year in the past, they could only bird watch for 20 minutes because the feet got tired, but now they could bird watch for an hour and a half. But they're not tracking that milestone because they were so focused on like vanity metrics. And so I actually had this discussion with a client today of reframing situations and helping you see the things that you're able to do to stay in a positive mindset. And they had been saying, well, maybe we should switch up my workout so that I can focus on this one like area of my body. And I was like, well, here's the truth. Like, a lot of people in this industry are always looking at themselves and thinking this is not good enough. They're always looking at different exercises to choose, and they're looking at different nutrition protocols. They're looking at different maybe supplements they could try. Like maybe they need a different brand of creatine. Maybe they need a different electrolyte. Maybe they need to get more sources of fiber, because they're always thinking that where they're at is not good enough. But what a lot of trainers in our industry and coaches struggle at is being able to see where they are, and being able to look at the evidence that they have made progress now versus where they were at a year ago, even though that may have not been the progress that they thought to look at in the first place. And so with this client that I was speaking to, we were able to kind of outline the things in which they have been able to progress despite the fact that they're aging year over year. They're able to do more things in their life, and they're able to do more things with like a sense of like ease. Like, you can gather a whole bunch of people into a room, and you can be like, okay, we are going to run across the field, and some people in that room will injure themselves, and some people will be able to run across the field 20 times. And to be able to accomplish a sense of freedom and autonomy where you can run across a field, play sports, do all these fun things, is going to have a much greater impact on your quality of life than whether you have like 6 visible abs or 2 visible abs. And it's these little things that we kind of lose touch with when we get too hyper focused on how we look, and not as focused in our quality of life and what we're able to do. So it's just like, it's something that I think all of us are a work in progress with, and it's something that we all benefit from, like another voice in the room just kind of giving us a gut check and be like, hey, like, you are very hyper focused on this one thing, and you've completely forgotten about these other things that you have progressed over time.
That part there, I think, is the crux of all of this, because it's who we become in the process that literally changes us, because the process changes us. And if, like, you'll see people do 12-week challenges over and over again, because it is so easy to do anything brutal, anything extreme for a short period of time, because there's an end date. It's easy to do anything when there's an end date because there's something you're working towards. But once there are these physical or tangible or what feels productive goals and landmarks, it's very easy to feel lost. And I feel like as humans, that's when we start to try to cling at anything we absolutely can. It's like, well, maybe I'll just aim for abs. Well, maybe I'll just aim for this, aim for that. It feels so productive. And I guess it's a human trait as well that we want to have a sense of control. And as soon as we have anything that's different from what we know, we then start to freak out. Maybe this is the wrong thing. And I see this a lot in my clients as an example, when they are so used to chasing weight loss, when they're so used to the fat loss metrics, like the scale, like eating less calories, that as soon as they try to start to like just trust themselves to eat a little bit more, it feels foreign, it feels scary. And because of that, it's almost like they want to cling to the scale again. What if this? What if that? And then they start to feel fat. I feel this. But it's not really something that is happening, which, as we spoke about at the beginning, we believe these things to be fundamentally true. But no, I'm feeling it. So it must be true. I'm eating, and just the sheer fact that they're eating more food, they're not focusing on less calories restriction. That all comes into this as well. And I know that we both coach people who are doing everything right, but they still feel stuck. And these kind of narratives play into this feeling stuck, doing everything right. And then you mentioned before as well with the biases, something that social media and Instagram and Facebook and Google and everything does really well is it feeds us what we lack, what we already search, what we want more of, because that's what's going to keep us on the platforms. So that in itself is keeping us stuck in our same cognitive biases. Can't remember what book I read it in, but it's like your whole social media feed is curated for you, but it's curated by you. So you're only going to stay trapped in that same cycle. And I know that you mentioned as well that you found what was more aligned with you, and that's what helped you shift your version of success. But how can you kind of frame that in a way that helps people who don't technically see it? Because you can say all these things, but it's not going to register with someone who believes something so fundamentally to be true.
Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a bit of a side quest for people, but I think it's an exercise that might be really insightful. I learned this from my friend. His name is Wilson Wong. He's based in Edmonton, and he is quite the character. He has a book on Amazon if somebody wants to look it up, because it tells quite a story. The exercise that he gave to me was essentially setting goals for yourself for within the year. And his whole protocol was to write down like a list of 100, and you don't even have to stop at 100. But what I took from it was that when you have to start writing down goals that go beyond like those initial like stereotypical first 5 that everybody can kind of think off the top of their head, because it's like, oh yeah, of course that's a goal, like eliminate your debt or get in better shape or whatever. Then you start to emphasize the goals that are kind of more subliminal, like back of your mind type things, where it's like, hey, I want to travel here. And then you start asking yourself, like, why do I want to travel? And then you start to see common themes. Like for myself, if somebody had me list off 100 goals, a lot of it would start to pertain around like identity, connection, purpose. Most of my travel for the fitness industry is to see people. It's not necessarily for like continuing education aspect. It's not necessarily for the geography. It's more so like a logistical strategy to be in the same rooms of people that I want to connect with, even if it's like a fleeting moment where we have like a few quick conversations and we don't grow that close. I like to know what I don't know. I like to see things from different perspectives. I like to get to know people's personality and values and visions outside of the screen. And so for me, if I was to go through that exercise of setting 100 goals, it would lead me to get that much more clear on what needs to be important in my year for those goals to happen. So a lot of my goals pertain around like being someone who's a good friend, being someone who is a good uncle, a good brother, a good son. And as such, I need to structure my life to have quite a bit of presence. And so then I need to set boundaries around my time, and I need to make sure that my career is at a level that frees up my time where I'm not worried about, no, I can't do this because I have to train these clients on a Sunday or something like that. So that is kind of what I would say is like if somebody needs a different perspective and sort of like a self-led exercise for how to kind of see beyond just like the vanity metrics, it would be to start writing down a list of like 100 goals. Because once you get past 20, like a lot of people are going to start getting uncomfortable. They're going to be like, I can't do this. And when you start to like take the pressure off yourself and not make your goals sound like impressive or perfect, and you're starting to write down like, well, actually, to be honest, I like to see like these horses at this one place that I've never been to, or maybe I want to see this sporting event that I've never been to. And then you start to get more clear as to like, maybe you do fitness not necessarily to look a certain way, but because it's the vehicle that carries you to all these things that you would love to do within that year if you had the option to do so. So that is what I would say to that.
That last part that you just said there, I really liked that one. Lit my hand up. It's like people don't actually realize until you lose it. For example, if you get injured or if you pull something and then you don't have your strength for you don't have your strength in a particular area, or you can't use your leg, or you can't use your arm. It's like, oh my God, I can't. Like, I'm just realizing now how much my life is limited because of this particular thing. It's not until after the fact that we then start to value things that we never really valued because we're too busy chasing things and chasing common ground, chasing lifestyle. That is what you want to chase. Like, you want to chase the things that empower you, the things that add to your life, and fitness adds to your life. But I kind of tying it back into the things that my whole like coaching stands for in itself as well is, if you're always chasing smaller, chasing the scale, chasing deficits, when in all of this, are you actually stepping back to realize, what is it that I want? How do I want to feel? How do I not want to feel? I feel like if we just started to act a lot more from that position, our goals, our habits won't be so fueled by like self-hate, by picking ourselves apart. It'd be more in line with, I actually want my life to be this amazing way. And in essence, that's going to get us the outcome that we want, because many of the things that we are doing, if we really think about it, it isn't really helping us feel any better. I know that now on the other side, I can't imagine a life not being as fit as I am now. Like, seeing people get sick really frequently, or having to visit the doctors all the time. I know that I absolutely hate going out of my way to visit the doctors. I would hate to go out of my way to have to spend XYZ on all these different medications because of something that I could physically prevent. And if we start to realize just how powerful building this shield of armor is, which is our muscle, and even the character that we build, the resilience that we build, being able to play with our grandkids, like moving through to think of, how do we want to live our life at 75 years old? Do you still want to be obsessing over food? Do you still want to be obsessing over all these materialistic things, only to realize, where is my quality of life? Like, what is it that I actually enjoy? What makes me happy? What lights me up? And you also mentioned, I want you to remember this one because I don't want you to not talk about this in your next bit of this, boundaries. Boundaries, I feel like, are so important because I feel like that's what stops us more than anything from continuously wanting to show up for ourselves, because these different things come in, and then the people pleasing comes in. And then you mentioned as well with setting goals, you don't want to set them with this like unrealistic pressure that you put upon yourself, or to be, and you mentioned the words, to impress people, to be impressive, or to be perfect, or whatever. It's like, you're setting your goals for yourself. but also where does this perfect come from? Where are these goals coming from? Instead of trying to chase something from that perspective, go back to, as I mentioned before, how you want to feel. But again, the boundaries need to come in, because it's really hard to do something consistently or to feel good in what you do if you're continuously putting yourself out to tend to this, to tend to that, without actually having parameters. And I feel like as a society, we've moved from one extreme to the other, where now boundaries or setting rules, so to speak, is something that's frowned upon. Like, you need to have a structure to work between, to a structure to move through. I would say the same for food rules, because it's the lack of food rules that serve you, because it's the lack of having those rules. Just like if there were no road rules, everyone would be driving around like an absolute maniac. It's not stopping you from getting to where you want to be. It's just controlling the traffic flow so you get there in a safe manner and you actually get what you want out of your trip without getting T-boned by some other car. And the same with your food rules. Like, your lack of structure around food is what got you to where you are now. Your lack of structure around fitness is what got you to where you are now. Your lack of boundaries is what's got you to where you are now. And you aren't happy. You're miserable. And this is where that life element comes in. And I really love how you mentioned this with your quality of life is how you now currently measure your success. And being able to drive, niece, or I think niece, see her play, being able to see your niece more. Like, these quality things allow you to live your best life, and fitness allows you to have the energy to do that, because so many people live life with their handbrake on because they're just so low energy. But yeah, I'll throw that over to you now, because I feel like this is important.
Well, you mentioned boundaries, so I'll definitely speak to that immediately so I don't forget. And it kind of stems towards, like, the expression hurt people hurt people. I find the same to be true with, like, when you have a lack of boundaries, you tend to abuse other people's boundaries. Or when you have a lack of boundaries, like, the outcome will never be positive for you, because, like, let's say somebody has a lack of boundaries, then they feel like they're without something. So they're without their time for themselves, or they're without a sense of value and, like, what they have to offer for other people. And so with that said, like, in times of my life where I've been very terrible at keeping boundaries, I've limited the potential that I had for my career, and as such for my personal life. Like, I was effectively limiting the budget that I would have for groceries, because I was just so giving of my time that it kind of bottlenecked the time that I would have if I was to take on more clients. I bottlenecked the time that I would have if I was to get a better night's sleep, all because I was, like, saying yes to absolutely everybody who asked of my time. And then when I made a shift to create better boundaries, and a lot of that was just kind of like being less accessible to more people, just sort of like having more parameters around, like, how one person would spend time one-on-one with me. And it seems almost like elitist, but it's sort of like, it's one of those things where it's like, the time that I value the most is my one-on-one connection time with people, and I only have so much of that time. So half of it is going to be dedicated to people who work with me live one-on-one, and it's not going to be free. And then half of it is going to be dedicated to the people who fill my cup in life, whether it be like mentors in my life, parents, family members, close friends, and like the occasional like podcasts and stuff like that. Because like these podcasts are enriching as well. But by understanding that, like, you do have to block out time, you do have to say, like, I am not available for this thing, or I'll circle back to you when I have time. And you just kind of like, you don't immediately satisfy everybody that asks of you, but you can also frame it in a way that doesn't seem like you are saying that they are without something. So if Sunny is like, hey, Chris, can you help sponsor this event and help out and volunteer at this thing on a Sunday? Then I would say, well, for the last like several years, Sundays is actually my day that I dedicate for visiting family. And so I'm unavailable on Sunday. I'm sorry to say that I can't help out. and that's how it goes. And if it was like a once in a year anomaly where it was something that really meant something to me, I might also say, hey, normally I would say that I was unavailable, but for you, because you're important, I'm going to make sure that I'm there, but I'm only going to be available for 4 hours. Then people can't extend it. They realize that, like, you are making an exception for them, but there is a stop point. And this has happened lots when I've helped out friends. I've been like, yes, I can help you. I love to help. It gives me a sense of purpose, but I can help for 4 hours and not 10. Because if you give people more leniency, if you give people the ability to flex on the amount that you're willing to give, they'll take as much as they can. And if you give more than what you have to give, then you're just going to wind up projecting on people who had nothing to do with the fact that you didn't have boundaries on yourself. The more you project on other people, the less other people will have to offer to you. The more you set good boundaries and the more that people respect those boundaries and understand them, the better positioned you are to find other like-minded people who are also moving the needle forward, who might inherently be able to free up more of your time as well. So it's kind of like positive, kind people tend to attract more positive, kind people. Well, people who are good at setting boundaries, delegating, and empowering others are good at connecting with other people who are good at setting boundaries, delegating, connecting, and empowering others. So you're going to find that you will attract a very like nurturing, empowering, very ambitious community around yourself. And that's where you get the compound effect, where you might have had a very like simple career goal, or you might have had a very simple personal goal, and you achieve that goal faster because you're not doing it by yourself. But the way that you found the right people was because you were conscious about how precious your time was and how you needed the things in your life that you needed in order to keep a good head on your shoulders.
I think people underestimate just the power of how everything is interconnected, where once you start aligning one area of your life in a way that actually aligns with you, then the other areas start to light up in the same way. And I remember this from a book I was reading where Sahil Bloom, The 5 Types of Wealth, there was like the compass, and the compass is kind of this metaphor of you always know where your true north is, and it's not a particular place. Like your north is not a place. When you set goals, when you make plans, I like the whole premise of plans aren't meant to get you to the end outcome. Stop setting plans to reach some end goal. And this is the whole, like, your goals are meant to evolve with you. Plans are meant to get you out of the door. You don't know what the terrain on the map looks like once you get onto the actual reality of terrain, which looks completely different from the map. And you can have, this goes to your thing of like chasing common ground with all these different perspectives. If you have someone who has kids, then their map is going to have everything mapped out. That's like the schools are here, the childcare is there, everything for kids there. But I don't give a shit about that stuff. Like, that's like, yeah, cool. That map can be sort of useful, but that isn't going to be helpful for me and what I value. And we can have everyone's maps, but also if we keep trying to collect everyone's perspectives without slowing down to figure out, okay, what is it that I actually care about? What do I want on my map? Then your north is going to be like one of those compasses that cannot even, like, the thing keeps flickering and it just doesn't find its north. And that's when you end up always feeling misaligned. And because you feel like you can't, this is then leading to the client I was mentioning before, where it's like you don't even know what it is you do want. You feel like you can never have it because you can't have this, you can't have that. You can never have what you want because they don't work together. Well, how would you know if you haven't yet got clear on what is it that you want to feel and how do all these different things align? And what is one thing or one area that you can just start to look at now and start to question, start to kind of like plant a seed, let it come into a rosebud, but you want to allow it to also expand. How can we start to let this stuff flourish? So then, like flowers how it starts to then drop its little seedlings and then nourish the rest of the soil, then everything starts to kind of align with it. And on that note, I feel like it's also really important to know what you don't want, like anti-goals, because we already know how we don't, like what we don't want physically. But that isn't based on, okay, well, what do we know in the past hasn't worked? What do we know in the past has led to particular things that we don't want to feel? Get clear on that, because I would assume that you also have clients or know people that have that already recurring, and it keeps recurring because they haven't used that to then guide them moving forward. So they stop repeating the same things that lead to the same outcomes that they very much don't want. And like you mentioned, who am I? What would the type of person who XYZ do in this situation? You are someone who values family. You're someone who values space, time, not feeling pressured or rushed, especially on a Sunday. Okay, you get asked the question, come do XYZ on a Sunday. What would someone who truly values family time on a Sunday do when asked to do XYZ on a Sunday? Well, that you can easily put them side by side. That person that you want to be doesn't align with doing X activity. So that's immediately a no. But then if you have other things on the criteria, like you also value community, then it's like, well, I do value this. I value this more. So maybe I can do this, but put a time limit to it. And this can factor into literally everything else that you do, because you can't say that you value your health. You can't say that you value peace and serenity and feeling in control and feeling like your life is flourishing, while also saying yes to working overtime every single night, to working through your lunch breaks, and then wondering why you always feel so stressed. You're resenting. That was the word that I wrote down, actually, resentment. There was something that you said that made me write down the word resentment. So I don't know where that came from, but you're going to end up resenting it because you don't have the boundaries there. So now you're hating the training. You never feel like you're progressing. You blame everything else. And that just makes you not want to stay consistent. But it was never the actual training that was the problem. It's that there is so much life stress going on that it is so difficult for you to actually focus on the training. And if I had to be vulnerable, I want you to touch on everything I said there, but I want you to also bring in vulnerabilities, because I know on your podcast, you talk about embracing vulnerabilities and the power of owning one's insecurities. I know that's a very big thing that you're big on. For me, when I was juggling, trying to figure out all these different work things, these social media things, like when I have one of those really heavy days, I find it really difficult to be who I want to be in the gym. And I know based off my whole history that when I am performing at my absolute best, when I know that I've given my best in the gym, I've fueled myself with the right carbs for my gym session, and I pushed every single set to the max potential that I can, I feel amazing afterwards. And that, like the interconnectedness, allows me to show up as a better person, a happier human. I feel more connected with my clients. I feel more connected with everything, because it was fitness that literally saved my life. If it wasn't for fitness, I don't know where the hell I would be, if living or dead. But because of that, that's become my anchor. And that's allowed me to realize how much more fruitful life is. And I don't feel people allow themselves to ever experience that. Resentment, boundaries, all these different things. But yeah, vulnerabilities too.
So I'm going to start by talking about resentment, because I think that's something that people get caught up on without like realizing they get caught up on it. Some of the common cases are something that some people have a hard time with, especially earlier on in their pursuit of their goals or in their career, is they have a hard time seeing someone else be successful or achieve something meaningful and detaching it from their own journey. So like, for example, I could have any number of friends get published in magazines or win like a competition, or have like a personal win, like maybe they get some amazing anniversary gift or something, and I can celebrate all of them, and it won't detract from my own personal ambitions or outcomes. but a lot of people struggle to see how that is true. They're like, well, if this person's winning, then I'm losing. But the truth is, if you're surrounded by people who are winning and it's like a trend and it's like it seems like it's something that you can't escape, everywhere you look, someone in your close circle is seeing progress and being able to show proof of their hard work, showing merit-based accomplishments. Like, if that is who you surround yourself with, it's almost like undeniable that you will probably get a win yourself soon enough, but you won't if you push those people away. And the biggest way to push those people away is to resent them for the hard work that they put in, to resent them for the dedication that they put in, because people won't go through the blood, sweat, and tears of achieving a goal that means something to them just to agitate somebody else. There's something for them that made them do the difficult things.
Oh,
And
no, you just said something. I want you, just something that I want you to bring into that. A powerful quote that has just stuck with me for ages. If you're having such a strong visceral response to something, which is exactly what you just said, this is a moment to stop and be curious. Why am I responding in this way? Where are these emotions coming from? Because there is a reason that you're responding to them that way. But then you can also flip it. Why are they being successful? Like what is leading to this? A lot of the time it's because we, like you mentioned, the lack of boundaries, like all these different things have led us to not being able to act on things. But all of this is within your control. So I want to know where that stops people as well, and what would you recommend?
so I would say that when people are finding themselves in that like middle point of like, am I resenting something? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I stuck in this point? There's usually something that's sort of like causing a little extra pressure, and it could be alleviated in an outside of the box kind of way. So for example, like, let's think about new trainers, new coaches. They will often have something to say about some other coach or trainer, and sometimes it's like a skill gap. So people just entering into the online space will be critical of people who appear to be more established in the online space, because they're like, if only I could get better at like filming videos, or better at doing this, or better at doing that, or if only I had better optics in like how I present online, I would be at another place. But when you're able to observe enough people's careers long enough, then you realize like most of what we see online isn't the reality of that person. And so the first course of action to take is like, if you have pressures of finances and stuff, solve the finances in the path of least resistance. So for a lot of people, like, let's say someone is pursuing a goal and the goal isn't allowing themselves to have the necessary baseline quality of life that they need, then take a skill that they're more competent at, put them together, and allow that to increase your quality of life. So for some people just starting out in coaching or training, they can pair coaching and training with like a part-time labor job or with a part-time service industry job to fill in the gap, so they're no longer feeling the pressure where they have to take their obstacles and act like it's somebody else that's putting it on them. And even if they got sabotaged at some point in their career, they're still going to find themselves needing to take the difficult path, take the high road, and just press forward anyways. And so they're still going to need to follow that same thing. But what ends up getting in the way for a lot of people is ego. They think, well, I have this, so I should have that. That person has this and they have that, but they're not thinking about what came in between. And a great case study for a lot of people is to observe what each individual did during like the pandemic, during the gym closures and stuff. Some people had to quickly close the gap on skill acquisition when it came to moving online. Other people had to quickly close the gap on, like, they started an email newsletter. Other people got more consistent on doing content. Other people did other jobs that were deemed essential in like their area to supplement the income that was suddenly made non-essential. Politics aside, is just what they had to do. And what happens is we refuse to acknowledge that for a lot of people when we're in the emotional state of like, this isn't fair. woe is me, this person's taking advantage, they have like a better situation than I do because they're doing something wrong and I'm just going to call it out. But the thing is, like, to say that somebody else is the problem and not take ownership of what you have control to do is only going to hold you back. And like it's just going to create more noise, and most likely that person who's ahead is going to be unbothered by it, because in order for them to get to where they are, they had to become unbothered by a lot of things. Whereas if you are relatively where you want to be, and you let the naysayers and the critics impact how you feel and how you think and your outputs, it's going to add an unnecessary noise to your life that you could have avoided by simply being like, it doesn't matter, they don't know me, they don't know what I'm working on, and I'm causing no harm, so I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing. Does that kind of make sense?
I'm just writing even more. I have so much crap. Wow. Okay. Wow. Ego. It's not just the ego in the way that you said it. I see this so often, and I feel like this also has become worse since the online world has become more saturated and just pummeled with more weight loss messages. And it's kind of crazy that most of what we see is the weight loss messages, but most of what people see is that because that's what they're looking for. So it kind of closes them off to the whole other world, like you said, the perspectives. And like I said, with social media, curates your newsfeed based off you. So you're already closed off to everything that's out there. And you mentioned this somewhere as well. I can't remember what led to it, but something about it limited your potential. I think it was the boundaries where it limited your potential because you were saying yes to too many things. And that's the very thing as well. If you're closed off to a whole other world, or you're closing off your perspectives and choosing to just go down this path, how would you ever know what is possible for you if you never take a step outside of the box? And we always have a blind eye. That's why coaches exist. That's why the best athletes have it. You can't, like, I had a client who said something profound to me that I should have known. There we go. I should have known. I said this to her. I'm like, yeah, well, you can't even see what's outside the box if you're in the box. And she's like, bro, well, she didn't say bro, but you know what I mean. Bro, I didn't even know there was a box. Literally those words. I didn't even know there was a box. We don't even know there is a box there. We are so, this is like my theme now. This is what I've been speaking about to death's end for the last 3 weeks, because it's just become so toxic. But this self-shame around everything is like, I should have my food together. My food doesn't look like that. Why can they do this? Why can they do that? But those questions are coming from self-shame. Like, you should already have your shit together. Like, you should be able to figure this all out on yourself, like on your own, which is why we don't even ask for help. But this in itself leads to resentment, because you're continually trying to burn away, which kind of comes to your posts that you put up. I've got one of these. Where is it? Sometimes your body isn't failing you. It's just tired of being forced into war. And I wrote something similar a while ago where it's just like, it's not about motivation. It's not about discipline. It's about the fact that you were never given a path that actually suits your reality. You were never given a path that actually is tailored to your capacities right now. You need to meet yourself where you're at. And that was something that you just mentioned there as well. People aren't meeting themselves where they're at. They're too busy trying to like chase these tangible things. And the ego, back to the ego, they don't want to look at what happened in between. Okay, we can talk about this in relation to what I stand for, which is you need to build muscle. You need to stop dieting all the time. You can't say that you want to have this amazing physique. You can't say, again, blaming other people like you just mentioned. Oh, I just made that connection. But it's like you can blame all these external things as much as you want. But you can't say that you want this outcome of this built physique if you're not willing to do that hard stuff. Like that, like you mentioned, the hard process. You're going to have to do that regardless. But the hard process isn't just the physical aspects. It's the mental aspects of having to build muscle, because that is going against the small narratives that you know, the narratives that you've been repeating as these old soundtracks. You need to create new songs, new rhythms, new melodies. And I say songs, rhythms, and melodies instead of just soundtracks, because you need to be able to sing to them and enjoy them. Because if you're not enjoying the process of muscle growth, you're never going to get there. You're going to want to keep shredding and cutting your calories, because muscle growth, you're growing milligrams, micrograms. The decograms, the things that they put on the vitamin D, whatever that U unit is. I think it's decograms. I don't know. But that is like the degree that you grow muscle on a weekly basis. So you need to enjoy the process. And this ties into something else you said, where they had to ignore that noise to get to where they wanted to be. And that's the thing. To become where they are, they had to fill in the blank. You become in the process. The process changes you. But most people avoid the process because it requires some level of discomfort. And I think the rush for results makes us want to just go bounds and leaps. So of course that's freaky. Of course you're scared. But how about we nudge ourselves gently, meeting yourself gently. This goes back to the, if you meet yourself with self-compassion, the progress follows. That's the thing, like nudge yourself gently and recognize that this is a hard process. It's not meant to be easy. If it was easy, the world would look like shirtless, whatever that carnival guy's name, walking down the supermarket aisle with just as much confidence as him, telling you that everything is toxic. Like the whole world would be that strutting down the streets if it was that easy, because we would have that level of confidence. But I would also argue that confidence will never, ever come from doing easy shit, because that confidence comes from knowing that you did something hard, you did something difficult. And you also talk about discipline often being mixed with self-punishment, and there being this fragile link between pushing yourself and punishing yourself, especially when you're stuck in that all or nothing mindset. And being someone who's worked in commercial gyms and online, you see a lot of these things. You've seen a lot of these things happening that convolute our meaning of what success is, of what results is, of what is progress versus something that just feels productive because it's something we can cling to. So I'm kind of curious where you will take that whole message.
So one of the other things that you wanted me to speak to was on vulnerability. So I'm going to kind of tie that into all of this. And it's basically how a lot of people will speak to discipline and they will demonstrate discipline, and they'll have just an impressive track record of like always consistently showing up no matter how they feel. But a lot of things, when they clash with experience, or when they clash with like reps, then they start to break down. So what I mean is, like, I can find all kinds of people in their teens, in their 20s, that can show me what work ethic looks like, and it's incredibly impressive, and there's so much that I have to learn from them, and they're going to kind of set the standard when it comes to some of the things that they do. But at some point, there is going to be something that's experience based or repetition based that throws them off, where that discipline no longer makes sense, and it's going to be more about identity. It's going to be more about purpose. So the first time that they encounter loss, where all of a sudden, like maybe they lose like a pet that they've had for like 15 years, that discipline isn't going to mean the same thing as it did a couple days before that happened. That's why for some people, they may benefit from having a coach in their 30s versus a coach in their 20s. And other people may benefit from having a coach in their 60s versus a coach in their 40s, because sometimes you need that life experience to teach you the nuances of when discipline matters and how it can show up in other ways. Because like for me, I've had days when I've started a day getting bad news about losing a family member, or getting somebody sharing with me something that like rattled me to my core about something that they were going through in their life, and I was the one that they told. And then I've had to kind of like channel the version of myself that could not only show up for that person in the way that they needed, but also show like consistency in how I showed up for everybody else in my day. So somebody can like wake you up and drop a bomb, like a metaphorical one, where it's like, hey, like I've been dealing with these demons for the past decade. I'm just telling you now. And you know internally that you need to hold space for these people, but you also need to set boundaries as to You are not their end goal. You are the safe person that they came to talk about the thing that they're going through, and you may be the person that refers them to the person that changes and saves their life. But you're not the person that's going to do the push-ups for them. You're not the person that's going to monitor them to make sure that they're safe 24 hours, because that's unsustainable and that will take you out. But then as a result, you now have this thing that you're facing, that you're dealing with, and the best thing that you can do in that situation is to humanize everybody, to realize that you are a human and you are not perfect. Your role model is a human and they're not perfect. Your parents are human, they're not perfect. Your siblings are human, they're not perfect. Everybody's going to have their ups and downs, their blips on the radar, their things that throw them off. And that's where vulnerability comes into play. Because when somebody's sharing with you something that's deeply vulnerable, they're probably sharing it with you because you have been someone who's made them safe to do so. And this comes up to the forefront when it comes to all the different mental health initiatives, which I'm very passionate about, is that when you create like an atmosphere for people to realize that nobody is absolutely perfect and spotless and just squeaky clean, then you become a sounding board for them. As such, you carry the responsibility to like have the right boundaries in place that show them that you care and that you're there for them, but also show them that they have to take initiative and responsibility for their own life path. I'll give you an example of how this shows up in my life. There's a lot of people who I care deeply about, but they find themselves in troubled times and might be like, "Hey, do you have some spare money? I'm hard up for cash." And so this is what I tell them, and I tell this to everybody. I'm like, I have a rule. I'm like, I can get you food. I can go grocery shopping with you, but I can't just transfer you money, because I know what people do with money when they're in a tough spot, and I know how human it is to kind of take the path of least resistance. And I've said this to people so many times, it gets easier every time, because there's just so many instances where this comes up in life when you are somebody that people trust. And as a result, despite the fact that it feels uncomfortable to give somebody news that they may not like, and despite the fact that their response might not always be like the most receptive, those people develop a sense of resilience and a sense of self-ownership, where they realize that they are in the driver's seat despite the fact that they're struggling, despite the fact that they aren't always disciplined. They're in the driver's seat, and somebody believes that they can bounce back. And if they have questions as to like how to do an upper body workout, I can support them in that way. If they have questions as to like they're struggling with their immune system, what kind of food should they eat, and I'll give general advice around like increase your protein. It's going to help with your immune system. Make sure you're getting enough water. Make sure you're eating whole foods. For a lot of people, that advice can be life changing, because too many people in their life were giving them terrible advice because they didn't understand the full context of the situation. And as such, when somebody has vulnerability, to not be worried about the outcome of presenting yourself as imperfect, but rather being able to see the bigger picture as to like, when you let somebody into your world just a little bit where they can see that it's okay to mess up, like when you do that, you could potentially position somebody to make positive changes in their own life, because they realize that their lack of like undisrupted discipline isn't an absolute failure. It's like the human side of them. And the best thing that they could do is get back to consistency and get back to getting that momentum back, because we all trip up sometimes, even within like the professional, like athlete space. Some of the most diligent, passionate, driven, successful athletes that I know, particularly in the jiu-jitsu space, they will and do and always have gotten injured. Like they're going to get injured, and they're not going to show up to the mats the same way that they did like 3 months prior. But there's going to be elements of their life that show up that same identity that they created for themselves, where they don't quit. If they don't quit, that's it. They show up, but sometimes they show up in different ways. And the one thing that always holds true is they don't quit. They don't quit on themselves. They don't quit on their teammates. If they broke like 2 legs and an arm, they're still going to show up in some way. So that would be the main thing that I'd say around like the vulnerability side of things. But I'm curious to see if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I do. Because there is something that you mentioned there as well, where you said, I know how human it is to take the path of least resistance. And something that I can't remember if I told my parents or if it's something that they have always said, but I have a long, terrible, dark sort of history with my brother. But whenever anything happened around them, I'm like, don't give him money, like buy him food instead. And my parents had this thing where they would give money to my nephews as an example as well, and be like, don't just give them money. Like, what's the point in that? They're just gonna spend it on stupid shit. Like, give them something that's actually productive. And I feel like that is a huge thing as well. Like, it is human to take the path of least resistance, but everything that you said there, the thoughts that kept coming to mind, and you even said this with the last part where you said giving that compassion to the other person and giving them that grace. It's funny how everything's like that person. And if we think about relationships, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself, because that guides literally everything in life. It guides your decisions, how you feel about yourself, how then you make other things mean to you, which then impacts your outcome, your experience with life, and your experience with your goals. And then that all interconnects with how then you interact with the world. And that has a flow on effect. And everything has a mirror effect. Like how you interact with anyone is then reciprocated in some way, which is what you said before. You surround yourself with positive people, etc. But how about the relationship with yourself? How about, you know how human it is to take the path of least resistance? Well, then why don't you say that to yourself, to like literally everyone out there? Because we expect ourselves to be this immaculate person that never makes mistakes. We shame ourselves for struggling. We shame ourselves for, the worst part is when things keep happening to us. Like there was 2 years ago, oh my goodness, I think it's my ADHD that was playing a part of keeping me going through this, because I can't, like, I need to keep like rabbiting at things, which was a positive aspect, but I had like 5 different things thrown at me in the 1 year, and it kind of led to some regression. But it's like, you can choose to surrender and say, woe is me, blah, blah, blah. I just have all these things happening to me. Or you can choose to focus on things that grew you. But if you've only known success in one direction, it's very hard to then, going back to the whole bringing life into this, bringing what fills your cup. That's when I went more into other elements outside of fitness. Yes, but also in with that, I was controlling what I can. I still showed up, even though I ended up crying in the gym like a billion times because I was having to go through this stupid protocol to sort some gut shit out. Like I had someone come up to me and say, "You've lost so much size." Yeah, I fucking know, mate. Like I'm not eating enough carbs right now and I feel like ass. And then I just started crying again. But it's like, I still showed up, and it's through the process, it grows you. It teaches you so much. But if you're so fixated on things needing to look a certain way, having to look a certain way for others, I think a lot of this, I know a lot of this, I just had that, wow, everything that we've spoken about never is about us. Like this whole podcast is not about you. It's not about me. It's not about any of us. It's all about how we want to be perceived by the world. Here's a mind-blowing question, kind of, but you aren't who you think you are, and you aren't who others think you are. You are who you think others think you are. Kind of like mind-boggling, but I feel like if we see things in that perspective, we start to question, okay, well, where am I in this situation? What is my voice? What am I allowing myself to shift or believe, or how am I allowing myself to act or not act because I'm worried about XYZ happening? But then how is it that I want to feel on the other side? I always like, how is it that you want to feel tomorrow? What does the tomorrow version of yourself need? Not the 3 years from now, and not the you now. I don't even care about the you now, because the you now isn't even future focused if we're focusing on the you in the second, because you're an amalgamation of the last 10 seconds, 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 months. But if we can start focusing on the next 10 seconds, 10 minutes, 10 days, 10 weeks, we can start to create your new reality. And I think if we come to it at the perspective of we are all just doing our very best. And if you come at it with, I am trying my best, doing my best, coming at it with self-compassion, then you should allow yourself to just move through the process without trying to second guess and change everything. And this also applies to your fitness journey, to allowing yourself to eat more. If you actually allow yourself to invest in a coach, this is again comes to the whole priorities thing where you mentioned, what is it that the vehicle part? Your body is a vehicle for so much, and it should be your prime investment. But you also need to vet your sources. And there are so many shitty coaches out there, even dietitians, which is so sad. I had a mate rant to me about a client he got from a dietitian who said, just fast after X PM, or just cut out X carbs, or just do this. I'm like, of course, dietitians don't understand this stuff. Like, dietitians don't understand how to optimize for sports and performance and body composition. Dietitians, most of the time, unless you have a sports dietitian, which is a completely different aspect, but the clinical ones are trying to prevent disease. They're giving you things to help you move away from diabetes, from clinical issues in that degree. What is it that you actually do want? Get the right resources for that, and realize that you can there are so many shitty dietitians, but there are so many good ones. There are so many shitty coaches, but there are so many good ones. Don't let one sour taste kind of have that self-fulfilling prophecy of blaming everything else. Like, it's also taking ownership in your process and just doing what you can with what you have, but also realizing you need to zoom out, because I feel like a lot of what you said with all of these perspectives is we will never know unless we actually zoom out. A quote that stuck with me, all the quotes that stick with me have been when I was thinking, when I've been running or doing cardio. I need to do cardio daily for this like brain thing. But you zoom out for perspective, because you can never have perspective when you're in eyeballing whatever's happening. But you can't move anywhere if all you're doing is zooming out. You need to be able to bring your perception to something. It's just that your perception is highly skewed, highly warped, and it can be completely wrong without the right perspective from zooming out. You could be in the wrong friggin' continent. So you might think that, oh my God, it's Antarctica. No, it's freaking Greenland. Just because it says green does not mean that it can't be icy. It's like, you need to have all of these different elements of knowledge of knowing that it's Greenland that's full of ice, Iceland that's full of green, but there's more areas on the world map that are icy than just the Arctic or the Antarctica. It's like that it's a weird example, but it kind of comes to the same thing. And I just realized the time. But I have one more question, and then I want to go into a quick fire round because I'm loving this conversation. But you help clients navigate life transitions like career changes, parenthood, and they're still maintaining their health and fitness goals. They're still supercharging forward into things that light them up. If anything, they're lit up more now because they have a different perspective to it, and their perception has kind of shifted, but they're realizing just how important keeping their health and fitness there as center front has become to all the other foundational elements of their life. So how do you help people and clients and anyone navigate life transitions? And then we'll go to quick fire.
Yeah. So to answer that, I would say the thing that comes up for everybody that I work with is that I make sure that they're still like enjoying the process. Then it doesn't mean that it's not performance based, and it doesn't mean that it's not like reaching their highest potential. It's mostly that the structure that I provide to them is going to be nuanced, is going to be different from person to person. I've started using this phrase called multi-layered coaching, because everybody that comes to me is probably going to have a slightly different like general nutrition protocol and a general different way to like relay back to me like the decisions that they're making throughout the day. And they're going to have a different movement protocol. Some people are going to be regimented where you can count on them to be in the gym 3 days a week. Some people it's going to be 5 days a week. Other people, you're going to get them walking more and off their blood pressure medication, and you're still going to be able to progress them month over month, year over year. And then it kind of comes down to if this person needs more time with you to make meaningful change, or if you've become like a sort of like a fixture in their life where you are their person that helps them to progress, and without you they would have a harder time progressing. Then it becomes a game of retention, where it's like you have to be a quality connection in their life. You have to enrich them in their life, and as such you should lead by example, and you should walk the talk. And so for myself, people can see this through the long history of my podcast going back to 2018, where I've brought in people that aren't necessarily your typical fitness person, and they may have dealt with like a rare disease, or they may have traveled the world without flying, or they may have just done something that nobody else that either of us knew had done, to show people what it's like to persevere despite the odds, and what a positive attitude looks like in that context. But yeah, the biggest thing is when I'm working with somebody, despite the fact that I can get them progress, despite the fact that I'm going to provide structure for them, I'm also going to make it fun in a way that they will keep going, to make it sustainable. And fun for each person's looking different. Like some people, fun is progress with strength. Fun for other people is realizing that they could go and take pictures of birds and travel more and just go on hikes with their kids, stuff like that. And that also fits into them improving their quality of life.
Fun, the process, persevere, despite the odds. Persevere is one of my favorite words. That is a tattoo I wanted to get, but all my tattoos have been from the one person who is my best friend. I was going to say was, because I used to live near her before I moved to States, and it's really sad. But persevere is a huge one. I just want to, because the last podcast we did was touching on tattoos. Have you got any new ones since that? That will be a quick fire question. Don't answer that yet. But because the last podcast, I'm going to try and find it and put it in my description below, because I feel like that was such a powerful podcast. Like we were talking about the meaning of this, and it's a quill. It's not a freaking feather, because this goes into everything that we just mentioned in this podcast. The reason it's a quill is because you write your own story, and the shadow below it is everything that we've mentioned. Like, you're going to have the doubts, you're going to have the bad days, but you're still writing regardless. And nothing happens without having belief in yourself. And I didn't realize I went looking for it the other day so I could send it to a client, and perfectly aligned. She's a really religious client, and perfectly aligned, it is religious. Seeing isn't believing. Believing is seeing. It's my favorite quote. I don't know whether you've watched the Santa Claus movie. Have you?
Maybe. I've never seen it.
Highly recommend it, because I don't know, like, that quote changed my life when I was a child, and it's stuck with me ever since. Seeing isn't believing. Believing is seeing. And if you can't believe you can do it, like, this whole conversation is founded on belief, because you're not going to persevere, kind of like man's search for meaning. You're not going to persevere if you don't believe there is something fruitful on the other end. And if you don't shift your beliefs, and that's going to lead into our first quick fire question. But just last sum up of something that you said, same ingredients, but different amounts, slightly different recipe, maybe different cook times, maybe different order of doing things, maybe a little bit more extra on top for the icing. But the ingredients, the same core ingredients that make a cake will always make a cake. The same core method of making a cake will always make that cake the best cake. Like, if you do things the wrong way, or if you put in way too much flour and way too little. I've never made an actual proper cake that wasn't a freaking protein cake. So I don't know how to make a friggin' cake. I don't know whether it's got, let's just say that I know there's flour in it. Maybe you might put milk in it. Let's just say flour and milk. Okay, you might put too much milk in it and not enough flour, and that's going to be a disaster of a cake. Like, there are some core elements that need to remain the same, but you can play around with different types. Like, what's your favorite type of cake?
I would say mine is a Black Forest cake, but like my mom makes one that's like different than the store-bought ones, where the icing tastes like everything just tastes better because my mom made it. But it's chocolate icing with cherries in the middle.
I love cherries. I love cherries. Do you like frozen cherries or fresh cherries more?
Well, like these are they're the canned cherries, so they're like super sweet
Really
and good
juicy.
and gooey. But like standalone cherries, I would probably take fresh ones instead because it's like a novelty. It's like something special. It's a nice treat because usually most of the cherries here are imported from BC, so somebody's driven them across the border from BC to Alberta, and so that it's sort of like a sign that summer is here. It's a sign that the weather is great, that that there's lots of things to enjoy about life.
Isn't it funny how even in cherries, something that simple, everything is connected. Like it's not just about the cherries, it's about the experience it delivers. It's not just about the weight training, it's about the life it gives you.
Yeah.
And just because you mentioned cherries, my mom makes this. I reckon it tastes kind of disgusting, but it's hard not to nibble at it at the same time. But there's like this Maltese Christmas pudding thing that's full of candied fruits. It's gross. But speaking of cake, like that cake, the same way that you would bake that black cherry indulged cake, the way that Chris would have it, would have probably a lot more cherries in it, but you might not want so many cherries on yours. You might want it to have a little bit more of a chocolate zest to it, or you might want to add some red food coloring and make it a red velvet version of a Black Forest cake, or just have a pure red velvet cake. Or you could be like me and flip the total script, like I always seem to want to do, and not have any of the normal ingredients, because I much prefer a gelato cake, because that's how I like my cake. I don't really like cakes. I don't like the sponginess of it. I never really liked cakes. I always used to eat the batter of it. And that's the thing. Like, we all have our different tastes and preferences, but the ingredients are the same unless you're having an ice cream cake. In Rich regard, it is still a freaking cake by the end of it. But the thing is, same ingredients, different sort of recipe for it, more of one thing, less of another, but it's all the fundamental same thing. And it is very hard to understand the fundamentals of a cake when you're so bombarded with social media flashing all these gimmicky products that make it seem like, well, that ties into what we were talking about. Then I'll go into the quick fire questions, I promise. But that goes into what we were mentioning before, with we always seem to grab for things that are the easiest to control. And that's the same with chasing like fat loss versus muscle building. It is so easy to go back to doing weekly photos and looking at your photo progressions over time and scale weight. But when it comes to muscle growth, it is much harder to be freaking patient in the process and to learn how to train properly, because that's a skill you have to learn and it requires patience, but you become in the process. You have to persevere despite the odds. Training for a physique is so much more than just following a program. It's so much more than just weight loss. Like, building muscle is a hard job. The only reason it feels easy is because fuck, we could talk for ages. We're going to have to do another podcast. The only reason it feels easy is because you're relying on old feedback from your novice phases. And that's what kept me stuck as an example, because I'm like, oh, I know this works because I've got so much progress already. And I did have so much progress because from where I was starting, I gained about like 9 kilos within my first year of lifting. And most of that was muscle mass because I was starting from, do you do pounds or kilos?
We do pounds for the most part. We should do kilos, but we end up doing pounds.
Freaking Canada. Come on, you can be better than, sorry guys, America. But honestly, like, pounds is so confusing. Regardless, I started at like 81 pounds, and then I worked my way up to about, that was the wrong keyboard. And then I worked my way up to about 99 pounds within my first year. So I'm like, of course, everything I'm doing is working. And actually, no, I was just adding to fatigue and fatiguing myself. And that's kind of what ties into that whole like self-destruction. My body was just tired of being forced into war, and it never made space for my new reality. And instead, I was just blaming myself. I was exhausting myself. I was wondering why I felt the way that I did. And then I thought I was doing everything right, because I was doing everything right. It was the right stuff that got me results. But what got you results at first? Anything will. But then what? And I think that's the most important part to take in, which is perfect because it leads into my first quick fire question. What would you say to someone clinging to the body they had 10 years ago, or a routine that used to work but doesn't anymore?
I would tell them to choose something that they genuinely enjoy and then create a plan to get progressively better at that thing.
Then you know that there are particular things that someone may not enjoy at first, but could come to enjoy. This is an off the cuff quick fire question because it's fitting with that. But have to come to enjoy. Like some people really hate strength training, but we know that strength training is a must for your future self. What would you then tell that person?
I would reframe what strength training looks like. So a lot of people are deterred from strength training because of how they feel like it has to go. But like even just changing up like the exercise selection or changing up the part of the gym that you train in. Like I train a lot of my clients in the corner of a gym where we have more space. It's a little bit more chill. They don't have to be intimidated by anything. For the more timid people, I'll bring the equipment to them. For the more brave people, I'll get them to like walk and grab the equipment so they get used to like how just like friendly people are. Like they can go around, walk by somebody lifting some weight, and nobody is unkind. If they can't find something, in most cases, somebody around them will help them find it. And then for somebody who's really reluctant, I'll just show them how these different exercises show up in their day to day. Like we have the exercise called the farmer carry. You can take a farmer and have them carry some buckets. Like my parents are on an acreage. They're essentially on like what is almost a farm. And so they can do a lot of exercises as they're doing chores around the house. And so in the past, because my dad's never been to like a gym, I show him how to do the exercises around their property. He's still working out. He's still doing the strength training. We can find all kinds of things that are heavy around the yard. And so if somebody has resistance to like the infrastructure of a gym or the logistics of specific pieces of equipment, just get innovative, get creative.
I love that. Get creative because I think creativity brings joy to things. It's hard to be creative when you give yourself such rigid lines to color in between. Next question. What top two things do you see most people chasing that actually keeps them stuck without them realizing? Or even if they realize it but are in denial?
Yeah, it's always comparison. I've seen this in the general population and in the coaching community where somebody sees something that somebody else has and thinks that they immediately have to have it. And by pursuing that thing because somebody else has it, you wind up not making the right motions to get that thing, and then you get frustrated. And that's when people start lashing out. Whereas if you allow yourself to be a little bit of a black sheep and just chase the things that you want for the sake that you want them, you're probably going to do beyond what it takes, which will result in either the success or the resilience required in order to keep going when you don't succeed the first time.
Resilience. That's another solid word. I love that. What's a coaching belief you used to hold that you've let go of now?
I think that when I first started out, I probably felt like I needed to be more of a authority in like how I presented things, what people thought about me, and just being able to adhere more closely to just one model for progression for people. Like maybe it was like I was really emotionally attached to like barbells or cables, et cetera, et cetera. But now I see that the more adaptive I can be to things and the more that I can kind of get to know people on an individual basis and just strengthen that interpersonal connection, the higher likelihood that I'll see progress across the board for a greater number of people, because I will be able to truly customize my approach and I will be able to meet them where they're at in a way that they never quit again.
That this is why programs never work and why transformation is in the coaching, because it is so much more rewarding to know that you're working to something a lot more individual and customized, and there's the adaptive and more than one mode of progress. Love that. Next one is, what's something you admire in your clients that they don't see in themselves, especially not at first?
The cool thing about the people that tend to choose to work with me is just how much heart that they have. To kind of give an outline, like the people that I have helped over the years are always thinking about other people's needs, whether it be like donating to the food bank or whether it be like helping out a family member. Like the younger clients that I work with, they'll be thinking about what they can do to help, like maybe a teacher, or what they can do to help a parent. And then the older clients that I have that I work with, they'll be thinking about how they can volunteer their time and the ways that their words can have a positive impact on others. So they're very like affirming of other people. They are sort of like the biggest cheerleaders of a lot of people in their life. And so when I notice these things, not only do I make sure that I point that out to them, because earlier we talked about how my version of me and somebody else's version of me are two different people, but likely that other person's version of me is going to be a much kinder version. And so if I have a version of somebody else that is most likely kinder to them than their version of them, I'm going to make sure that they understand loud and clear like what my version of them is, so that they see their good qualities and so that they're able to really like own them going forward, so that they see how many strengths that they have. Because a lot of people go into their life thinking that life will be good when they have more good qualities, not realizing how many good qualities that they have. And when they get to really own that, their life gets better in short term. And as a result, they make better connections going forward.
I feel like we're so focused on where we lack that we don't give ourselves the chance to strengthen or to use our strengths to help improve everything else, because you never want to ignore your weaknesses, because otherwise they'll remain weaknesses. But if you never actually give airtime to your strengths, how can you expect to move anywhere when your strengths could be the very things that propel you forward? And sorry, one more quote before going to the next one. Something else that stuck with me while I was running this time was use moments of struggle, of failure, of lacking as moments to realize your untapped potential, because those moments of failure, the moments where you struggle, are areas that you can work on to improve, to strengthen, that will boost up your floor, that will increase your potential. So anywhere that you lack, see it as come at it from a curious place so that you can actually improve without the self-shame. I feel like if you come at things, like a huge thing for me is curiosity. And it's something that I'm actively working on myself, because I let it go last year and it's led to really bad heights. Again, vulnerabilities. This is a vulnerable podcast, but my anxiety got uncontrollable because I do suffer with like panic and anxiety stuff. But reframing that feeling in my heart as I'm just getting excited. And I feel like if you can reframe fear or worry as curiosity, and any shame as curiosity as well, like all those things, coming at it with more questions, you get to understand yourself more. Because I feel like so many of us don't understand each other, and we don't understand ourselves, which kind of ties into the next question, where what do you do when you're feeling like you're in that state where you're questioning everything, you're ambivalent, or you're feeling unmotivated and nothing's working?
So for me, it's one of two things. One of them is I just go and I get a good workout, because that's a good way to reset. The other thing is I will, for the longest time, I call these vision quests. I would basically go for a long drive or go to the mountains, but now it's kind of evolved as I've gotten older. Like sometimes just going for a walk in the trees with my parents, or like maybe a sibling or a good friend or something like that, and just talking it out. Being able to just kind of like talk through the things that are on our minds, or even finding an opportunity to support somebody else going through something. There are times when it's more beneficial for me to just go out solo somewhere and just walk until my head is clear. But in most cases, it's movement related, and it's getting to a point where I can eliminate the things that don't matter just through sheer accumulation of effort to something that has low risk. Like some people will just like put themselves through absolute misery to hit that reset button. But you could also go for like a 5-hour walk and still be able to work out the next day, still be able to fulfill all your obligations the next day, have done something significant enough to have your mind off of the things that don't matter. And potentially on your journey back home, whether it be driving the car or walking back, you'll probably have a new way of seeing things that you didn't have on the way there.
I also feel like there was seeing things you never thought on the way there. There was one time I always used to walk around this particular park in a certain direction just because it was the natural way that I would walk. I never once thought to walk it in the opposite direction. And walking in the opposite direction, it was like I was walking in an entirely different place. Like I saw waters and lakes that I didn't see before. It was just insane. I'm like, how did I not see that before? Especially how often, like, it's not like I couldn't see it, but for some reason I just didn't see it. It's insane. And almost like when you read a book or you revisit a particular thing at a different part in your life, it's not just being like, oh, I didn't read that before. It's realizing it. And I put this onto my Facebook today as well. It's like, don't just go through, like, yes, you want to focus forward, but don't just do that without reflecting backwards as well, because you seem to forget how far you've come. And as I was reflecting on my last session of barbell squats, because I'm moving away from barbell squats now and just focusing on deadlift and bench as my powerlifting stuff, and everything else is very much now going to be tailored to hypertrophy. But I reflected on the fact that after tearing my hamstring and not being able to train my favorite movements for 16 months and being so hard on myself and all that kind of jazz, for the fact that I was missing my beloved deadlifts. Like my attachment to deadlifts, I'm pretty sure. But realizing, hey, all I ever wanted for years is to stop fluffing about, playing around with 10-kilo plates, 20-pound plates, 30-pound plates with my warm-ups and just put on the freaking 45s, and being able to use that as my first warm-up set. I've been doing that for the last year, and I wanted to work up to that for so long, because it, like, playing around with, like, okay, let's put the 10s on, take them off, put the 15s on, take them off. This time I can just put on the 60s and then just add on the extra plates without fluffing around. And I never once stopped until last week to realize, oh my God, here I am beating myself up at where I'm not at where I was before, comparing those two things without realizing I'm starting from a whole new canvas. I tore a hamstring. I lost 3 kilos of muscle over lockdowns. This is a new slate. It's now building up from here. And wow, this is what I wanted the whole time. And that's what I'm doing now. You need to give yourself that perspective. I'm sorry, you spark so much freaking shit in me. Why do you do this, Chris?
I don't know.
One more thing that you said, and then I'll move on to the next ones. The next ones are actually much quicker. But you said high emotion. Well, no, you said low risk. And then what I wrote down for that is, when you're in a period where that's filled with high emotion, always go for the low risk stuff. But when your emotions are a lot more settled, that's when you have a wider scope of things to pick from. And this is why emotional regulation is so important, because if you're always picking the lower risk stuff or always going for the safer choices for some sense of control, you're never going to reach your full potential. And this is why I would say emotional regulation and understanding yourself, going through the process, is probably the most fundamental thing to being all that you want to be, feeling all that you want to feel, because now you've opened up a whole new world. Okay, the really quick ones now. Book recommendations. What's a book that has profoundly impacted your life? You have 3, top 3.
Okay. I have to think real quick. I'm going to dig through my Audible and see which ones I've enjoyed recently, because what I found is my book recommendations, some of the ones that I used to recommend, I've changed my mind on.
Do you have Goodreads?
I don't have Goodreads. So the books that I'm going to recommend is, this is one, Unlocked by George Mumford. So George Mumford, he works with a lot of athletes on mindset, and I really like his work. The other one that I'm going to recommend is, let's see. And the crazy thing is, like, people will recommend books that I don't have faith in, and I'll listen to them anyways. Ooh, here's another one. This one I've recommended since early in my career, and I'd still recommend it. Psycho Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And then the third one,
Psycho-cybernetics.
yeah.
Interesting.
Third one,
It's in the description.
third one is going to be Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. That one I got gifted to me by a good friend at a time when I was kind of unsure about like the potential for me to get momentum doing things my own way. And that kind of stems back to the importance of understanding that your path might be different than other people's path, and the point isn't to copy other people or do things because other people did them. And there's no scenario where everything that you do everybody will like. There is scenarios where everything that you do somebody will like, but the most important scenario is that when you do something, it's something that means something to you. Even the tough things, even the difficult things, it means something to you because you can see the point of pushing through to make it happen. You can see the point of accumulating experience. You can see the point of showing compassion or support to somebody else, and maybe that stems back to meaning something. But yeah, that would be my 3 book recommendations.
Funny how that comes back to supporting relationships, connections, all these things that are absolutely fundamental for a flourishing relationship with yourself. And this whole premise of this whole podcast is you cannot achieve anything without that, like without coming from a foundation of a good relationship with yourself. Which brings me to, is there a daily habit or ritual that you swear by for maintaining this balance and productivity and this everything, this aura, this energy that Chris has?
Yeah. This one, some people aren't going to think that this one's a big deal. Maybe they're doing it too. Other people might think that this is a great thing to adopt into their lifestyle. And I want to preface it by saying that if you don't have the same people that you can talk to, just choose people, sponsor somebody, maybe have a rotation of people. But for myself, like 90% of the year, I'll call my parents every day. And if it's not a call, it's definitely a text message. Right now, they're traveling, seeing some friends. So we do text message because they're having visits and having dinners and stuff. But the amount that has shaped me as a person, because I'm constantly having check-ins with them, I'm very comfortable telling them things that I struggle with, that I'm like dealing with, whether it's like self-doubt or fears or just emotional things to do with like maybe things that we're all going through together. So what I would say is have someone in your life that you have check-ins with, like even if you are like in a relationship or you've been married for years, have somebody you check in with, and have it be beyond just like sending memes to the boys, or have it be beyond just like the transactional check-ins. Make a point of having a reoccurring connection where you ask people how they're really doing, and you make sure that they're taking care of themselves, and they make sure that you are doing what you need to do, that you're making your bed, that you're renewing your insurance on your car, all these little things that can get left to the wayside if we forget how meaningful and transformative quality connections are.
Quality connections, honestly, I feel like that's one of the greatest things. The last question is, what would you want to tie this up with for people who are still detached, people who are still attached to the hustle culture and to external validation, especially when it comes to success or even body image?
I would make sure that people understand that this all ends. Like, we're thinking that we need to go faster, we need to be better, we need to do this and that and the other thing. If you don't put time in your life for the things that make life great, they're not going to happen. So a lot of people are going to be putting off like making time to be with their friends, and they have basically signed a pledge that that's not going to happen in their life, because the likelihood of them continuing the same patterns that they had this year into next year is high. And so if you start to prioritize really integral things into your life now, even if not all of it takes shape this year, it's more likely to take shape next year. And like for a tangible example, on my podcast, probably in 2020 or so, I said that like I was going to make a point to go and visit with more and more people that I had interviewed on the show. And like this past year, we're like just halfway through, and I've probably visited at least a dozen people that have been on my show that I hadn't met before. And I was able to build up to that momentum because I set the intention like 5 years ago. And so when people have intentions to be purposeful about how they spend their time and how they spend their life, it's going to shape the decisions that they make with their finances. It's going to shape the decisions that they make with what's important, what's not. It might sway them from maybe instead of getting a Lamborghini to support this big milestone, maybe I will get a traveling bus and I'll just work remotely in the bus and I'll go from like town to town. Like it can completely transform what people prioritize, and it can change their life, because the wealthiest people that I know still value connection just as much as I do because of how much it impacts a person's feelings in life. They could have anything that they want, and what they value most is having coffee with a friend, having meals with a friend, doing like a athletic pursuit with a friend, or chasing goals with a friend. They don't care about the vanity. They don't care about the possessions. They don't care about like the gold plated award on the wall. They care that they had somebody to spend life with. And if you don't water the plants of your friendships and your connections leading up to that moment, you won't have that when that moment matters.
I love that a lot, because it truly is the connections that guide you. And if you don't know what you value, it's going to be hard to feel fulfilled in anything that you do, because that is where that disconnect comes. And the values come from knowing, again, having that relationship with yourself, slowing down, realizing, as I didn't start the podcast with, but started our conversation with, your goals are meant to evolve as you do. You do not start out the same person that you are, that you will be 1 year, 3 years into the journey. And if you think that you are still the same person, then you're doing it wrong. You haven't changed. You're not going to get to where you want to be, because a new level of you, a new level of life fundamentally requires a different version of yourself. Those values shift over time. You'll have kids, and then if you still lean into your old values, you're going to have such an unfulfilling life of parenthood, because you're trying to live a new life shoved into old versions of yourself. Just like when you're trying to build a physique, if you use the same analogy, if you're still trying to fit into skinny jeans that aren't made for a fit physique, then how do you expect to grow the physique that you want, to build the physique that you want, if you still try to fit yourself into old metrics, old ways of doing things, old time lines? Because fat loss happens really fast, muscle building doesn't. It all is connected. It all is connected. So with that, let's be all connected. Instagram is Christian Liddle. I'm going to put it down below. I found the episode from Believe in the Quill as well. I'm going to put that down below, which has Chris, me, Mark. We're all talking about things that bring life this meaning, but also remembering everything that Chris did talk about and mention. None of this can happen without that belief in yourself. And there was something that you were saying in that last bit, which just made me think even more. That's because you had that belief when you were going for those pursuits. Oh, that's what it was. You said that there was that person that made you do, like, go all into social media or go all into what it was that you actually wanted. The reason that you were hesitant with that is because you had to build that belief that you can work in a certain way. And this is the thing, like, we have those hesitations. We're going to need those connections to help support us, because we can be so good at cheering other people on, but how about yourself? That is where we realize that we need that coaching, we need that mentoring, we need that other person, and we need to remove the shame that comes from needing someone else. Because I feel like there is so much shame that comes from ever needing anyone else's help, especially as a female, because the narrative is that we should be able to do it all, be the mother, be this, be that. Yeah, okay, in the past. But now, cost of living, the fact that so many women work 2 different jobs, it's like, come on. Actually, yes, that perception, but this is where that perspective needs to come in, that things have really shifted over time. You need to realize that now this is where getting the extra hands is your forte. That is actually a strength. That's you fulfilling your strengths, going all into the things that light you up, because you're not letting the things that drain you drain you. So with that, I went on another rant. Is there anything that you want to leave this podcast with, tied off with? I'm going to shoot you one last question that I want to introduce the description with, but is there any lasting words?
I think my final sentiment is that if you've made it this far into the episode, make sure to check out some past episodes of the podcast. This is me speaking to the listeners. Make sure that you dive down the rabbit hole a little bit, see some of the other people that Ruby has talked to. And honestly, like, we talked about how important it is to identify strengths in other people. Something that you can do to amplify this podcast is to write down the strengths that you are noticing in the episodes that you listen to and leave it as a review, whether it be on Apple Podcasts or on anywhere that you listen to podcasts, even if it's on Spotify, etc. But that is super, super important, because that's what enables more conversations to happen. And it's a way of you showing appreciation to your gracious host, Ruby.
That I really appreciate that. There is also Chasing Common Ground. I do have that link in the description as well, but it will mean the world to me. Go back, listen to the last 2 episodes that tie into this as well. But yeah, it will mean the world to me if you could leave a 5-star review. I really want to get to 100 5 stars. I'm getting there. I'm at like 67. So please tick me up, and I will be so very much appreciative. And if you message me on Instagram and let me know that you did, I will see what I can do out of mutuality, or reciprocity, I should say, how I can help you with one of your pressing questions. So with that, I'll leave you all with this, and go and connect with Chris. Go message him. Go let him know if you relate to anything that he said. He, as you know, he values connections. He will respond to you. He always does. And you'll hear me in the next episode. Bye.